हम शंकराचार्य मध्यमाम अस्मदाचार्य पर्यंतां वंदे गुरु परंपरां नारायण समारंभां आचार्य मध्यमाम अस्मदाचार्य पर्यंतां वंदे गुरु परंपरां नाहं कर्ता हरिकर्ता पूजा कर्मचारिणं यद्यत् कर्म करोमि ओम नमो भगवते शिवानंदाय। ओम नमो भगवते चिदानंदाय। ओम नमो भगवते कृष्णानंदाय। ओम नमो नारायणाय। ओम नमः शिवाय। Very happy to have darshan of all spiritual experience this morning. Swami gave a very elaborate introduction. I would like to say that I am just like you. A mumushu, a jignashu, a spiritual aspirant, and I wish to become a disciple of Buddhism. Because being devotee is the first step. Being a well-wisher is the first step. Then you become a devotee, then you become a follower, and finally you become a disciple. Discipleship is a very high position and spiritual value. So everyone should try to be a disciple of an spiritual guru. That's the highest position which we can take. Today, I would just like to talk something about God and Avataras. So everybody has got some idea about God. Everybody has got Avataras, what we call in Hindi, right? Everybody has got some idea, some conception about it. Let us try to go more into it and try to understand the deeper ramifications of it. Shall we call Swami Shivanji Maharaj or say atSivananda a God? What shall we say? Shall we call them? Now, there was Avataras also, right? The Avataras also is a doctrine, science of reincarnation. So, shall we call Shankara, shall we call Avataras, Lord Shivam, Vedas, shall we call Avataras, Lord Vishnu, right? So, before we start about that chapter, I just want to say something about what Swami Shivanji Maharaj has said on this chapter. Something very interesting before we come to the main topic, right? Basically, the ultimate goal of human being, that is atSivananda. Why? Knowledge of self. Knowledge of self is something, it gives us nitya mukti, eternal perception. See, we want in a way more or less same thing, but we can say like this. Permanent remission from the suffering. That is permanent remission from the suffering. That is durti atyantik nivrutti. Sometimes we can have the suffering and temporary relief, but we want that to relieve forever. Second is called Paramananda Prapti, the bliss that abides forever. And third thing we call is nitya mukti, eternal satisfaction. These are all Latin words, but this is how it is called in Ashram. That durti atyantik nivrutti, remission of the suffering in total, Paramananda Prapti, attainment of eternal bliss, and nitya mukti, eternal satisfaction. So this can come only from Atma, because that is our own Swarupa, that is our own self. It cannot come from any other source. It can come only when we have the knowledge of the true self. because we are all born with some kind of ignorance. It's called avidya. This particular experience of blissful self is not becoming natural to us. Correct? So what happened was, that in very early times, when the creation took place, at that time, Vedas were revealed by Brahma, and the rishis of your earlier times, in their deep contemplation, this they called Jnanarasi and Satyarasi. The knowledge, the esoteric knowledge of the Veda, as well as the words, were revealed to the rishis. And that cosmic, huge plethora of knowledge was there. And that was carried on by Shruti Parampara. The Guru will decide, the Shishya will take, and like that. It went on for a very long time. And YVFAcourse, he thought that at some point of time, this knowledge may not be lost to humanity, because we may not have that sharp intellect to retain that. So he did not create. But YVFAcourse organized the entire spectrum of these Vedic mantras and systematically classified them into 4 Vedas. And then there are different branches which you know about that. So YVFAcourse is the one who can be considered as the eternal or the first editor of the human life. That is because he was the first one to do the editing work, and that Vedas came into. And in the Vedas, there were different ways of explaining this individual self, the universal self, the relationship of individual with the world. So, just to reconcile the apparent differences, there are no differences. But when we do not have the absolute knowledge, there are apparent differences. And once we know you have knowledge, the apparent difference is reconciled. In any field of life, the apparent difference is resolved. As we go higher up, the lower level of difference is automatically reconciled. So that is how YVFAcourse composed what we call it as a Brahma Sutra. We call it as a So the Brahma Sutra is the creation of YVFAcourse. He authored that. Vedas is only composed, organized. But Brahma Sutra is his creation. And different acharyas have been Ashram that. And he also composed Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, we have got Bhagavad Gita also. So Upanishads are a part of the Vedas which he composed. Brahma Sutra is something which he created. And then Bhagavad Gita, which is a part of Mahabharata. So these 3 are considered pivotal or fundamental to the knowledge of Sanatana Dharma. And what do we call them? We call it as a Prasthana. So this is the substratum, this is the foundation from which all other thoughts, all other teachings are come. So, and the great acharyas were there. Because unless and until the acharyas probed into that and gave that commentary, Bhashya, the meaning of this would not get into clear to me. So after the YVFAcourse came the role of this acharyas. The Acharya Shankara is the one who revived the entire Sanatana Dharma, and he explained the deeper import of this Vedanta as Keval Advaita, absolute monism. One alone exists. All that we see is a manifestation. Right? The substratum of everything is one. That is how Adi Shankara, Keval Advaita. And then different acharyas also came in Bhakti Marga. Ramanujacharya, he talked about the qualified monism, or we call it as Vishishta Advaita. As far as Adi Shankara is concerned, the Supreme Parabrahma is indifferent. Udasi, it doesn't engage into any activity, only power and Maya that does. But for Ramanujan, Vishishta Advaita, which he composed, that is Savishesha Brahman. It acts carry out some activity. And then we had Nimbarkacharya, we had Dalladacharya, Shuddha Advaita, they don't recognize the principle of Maya, Dalladacharya. That is only thing what we want to say is that these different acharyas have brought out the meaning of this Prasthanatraya in their own way. They are not fundamentally different. They are only different interpretations, right, of that three Prasthanatraya. It is suitable to the people of that particular time. And that is how the whole thing is remained. So, original job was done by Ishvara himself. He created the Vedas and revealed to Brahma. When the Acharyas came, Ved Vyasa and the Acharyas came, and the same work is continued by the Mahapurushas. Like Maharishi Aurobindo, Raman Maharshi, Swami Shivananda Maharaj. They have carried the job of perpetuating, carrying forward that particular divine knowledge, that particular divine essence. They say any good thing is carry it forward, don't stop anything anywhere. In your life also, when something good happens to us, the Mahapurushas say carry it forward, don't stop it like that. Just by saying thanks, don't stop it like that. But the Mahapurushas, they have done two jobs, whenever they have been born. They have done two jobs. The first thing is that out of their immense compassion, they are the personification of the most horrible Lord of mercy and love, we say like that, right? So that mercy is there in them. So out of the sheer compassion, mercy for the mankind, that the same knowledge, not that they have given something new, or they have given a new concept, they have given a very fine new interpretation of these texts in a way which we can follow in our own way. So Mahapurushas have got two jobs. The first thing is that they have carried forward, continued this Jnana Pravaha, number one. And second thing is that out of that immense mercy for the mankind, they have shown a lot of mercy and helped mankind in a way that man should achieve the same high spiritual status which they have attained. They don't want anything less. Whatever realization, whatever ecstatic experience they had, same thing should come to each and every human being. That was their compassion. And that is how all these Mahapurushas who had self-realization, they can be called as Anshavata. They are also called as Anshavata. So that is all about that Anshavata. Now, there are some other Avataras also. So we were about 10 Avataras for the incarnation Srimad Bhagavata also, right? So that is known to all of us. And out of that, we call two as Purna Avatar. So we call Lord Rama and Lord Krishna as a Purna Avatar. All Avataras have had some very specific significance, but these two Avataras are called as Purna Avatar. Why are they called Purna Avataras? Because they represent or they manifest all 16 kalas. That is how they call it as a Purna Avatar. So, Rama and Krishna, they are called as Purna. Then we have got Kala Avatar. So, Kala Avatar, this is all the running of Swami Shivananda Maharaj. I am just saying before we come to the other subject also. So, Kala Avatar is something which represents or which manifests any one particular kala of their supreme being. Then we have got Shakti Avatar. So, Shakti Avatara is the one which manifests one particular aspect of power of Ishvara. That's called Shakti Avatar. Then you have Avesh Avatar. So you must have seen sometimes, very ordinary human being also. Sometimes it's very divinely, and you will suddenly how this God has come to him, and you find something very special emanating from an apparently ordinary looking person. Suddenly assumes a God-like appearance. And that is also called as Avesh Avatar. So suddenly God comes into him and he reveals his special message. That's called Avesh Avatar. And then we see Lord manifesting in form of a particular deity in particular place. That is also called as Arch Avatar. A-R-C-H, Arch. But that is Ranganath of Sri Lanka, this Mahakali in case of Dakshineshwar, Vichara in case of Pandharpur, Krishna in very famous Udupi, that you know. good thing to start with. Ultimately, that God, out of His immense compassion, comes and manifests Himself physically in this particular universe in order to normally know the Bhagavad Gita citation very often. That is one way we can say that for the protection of the righteous and for punishing this wicked, He is born. But at the same time, God presents to us the ideal in a very personified way. Whatever we know about the divine attributes, they are not just theoretical concepts, but they are something which can be lived, personified. That is what we can learn from the life of Sri Rama, from the life of Sri Krishna. So all various avataras are there. And even these Mahapurushas, as I said, can also be called as Anusha Avataras. And they have contributed immensely to the mankind. In Swamiji's words, this Jnaneshwari Gita is something which is a very wonderful exposition of Bhagavad Gita. Then with Ramayana we know of Valmiki Ramayana. It has got a great spiritual depth. But then again, to make it more human friendly, to make it more compatible to the contemporary times, there is a Amban in Avid and very famous Ramcharitmanas in that Tilabari in and then you cannot give Bhagavad and these are all little brief introduction, and it talks about the avataras and the different manifestations of God. Right? Now, avataras are there. Now let us try to go into more fundamental aspects. Correct? What do we call it as God, and what are the various expressions thereof? The first thing is, what is the correct word for that God? Because the word, when we say, it's English word. There are some limitations of the word God also, correct? So, Jayant Swamiji Maharaj, used to say that supreme reality or supreme essence is possibly the best translation of what we understand by God. Supreme reality, supreme essence, supreme principle. This is something which best describes the what we call it as the highest reality or God. Now, this reality has been named differently in different scriptures. If we see Upanishads, what do we find there? What is supreme reality? What is the common word used in Upanishads? Brahman. Whenever we call Smriti Grantha, like the Bhagavad Gita, the word very commonly used is Brahman. Very nice. And when we talk of different Puranas, like the Bhagavad Purana, what word is commonly used? Ishwar is there, but they are more commonly used with Bhagavan. So Bhagavan is there called in Puranas. Paramatma is generally called in this Smriti Granthas, and Brahman is what we call in. Now these represent the same. Now let us understand by our own analogy that what we call Brahman, what we call Paramatma, and what we call it as Bhagavan. Are they Sagun or Nirgun? Are they with form or without form? These words go to the imply. They imply what? Because when before Brahman, nobody is thinking of Nirgun Virakar, and then when you call Paramatma or the Bhagavan, you think of Sagun Visara. So this is both, Nirgun Virakar as well as Sagun Virakar. So that is called as Sagun Brahman or Nirgun Brahman. And both essentially are the same thing. So why this manifestation has come? So manifestation has come very difficult to explain. When you read various books, you won't be able to find out why this creation has come and why different divas have come. If you see the flora and fauna, thousands of why have they come? So very difficult to explain. They say that once upon a time the supreme reality willed that Ekoham Bhausha Prajadevata. I am one, inherent. Let us not think more about why you think like that. That's something beyond our scope of understanding right now. But let us accept what the Vedas says. And when they say that Ekoham, one and non-dual, so that is what is the basis of this concept of God. Now when we say Brahman is without attribute, without form. And when it thought that I would like to become man for Leela, I say called, right? Just Leela of the Parvana, you would like to become man. So how did that happen? How did that happen? That is because the same Brahman, there is imponderable, mysterious power of the same Brahman, what we call it as a Maya. What we call it as a Maya. What we call it Prakriti. Again, there are two types. Higher Prakriti, lower Prakriti, like that. You all know that. The higher Prakriti and the lower Prakriti. I think these all use the same Bhagavad Gita also. Like lower Prakriti is the one when you imagine with that they get this physical universe. And in this physical universe, what represents as Jiva, what represents a sentient being, that's a higher Prakriti. So 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita describes, the two different types of Prakriti. Para and Apara Prakriti is called in Bhagavad Gita. So Apara Prakriti is one which gives birth to this universe. And in that universe, the God enters in living principle. That is called as a Para. So when that Brahman associated with its mysterious power Maya, then it becomes the whole Brahman. Then it becomes the whole Brahman. And what do we call it? That is called as a Ishvara. So in other way you can say that Lord manifested not in two forms, but for the sake of understanding you can say in two forms. One is macroscopic and one is microscopic. So what shall we call in Sanskrit or Hindi? Samashti and Yashti. Because we all see that we exist as individuals. That's the Yashti part. And we see the whole world existing as a Samashti also, right? So one is Samashti, one is Yashti. One is macroscopic, one is microscopic. One is Brahmanda, one is Pindana. So that is individuals that are. So first part when we say that the Maya or Pahita Chaitanya means Supreme Reality of Brahman. When it associated with its imponderable power Maya, it became Ishvara. It became Ishvara. The first thing is Ishvara, that's the word Brahman, Maya or Pahita Chaitanya, or Maya Vishishta Chaitanya. Now again, before we go further, let us understand that for all practical purposes we try to say that Maya and Brahman are different. But Mahapurushas have taught us, that although they are seemingly different, they are the two aspects of the same reality. They are just like the two sides of a coin, the obverse and the reverse. Jnana Swamiji Maharaj, in one of his beautiful books, which I would recommend you to read like anything else God has taught. In the first chapter he has described, that this Maya and Brahman, they are distinct without a difference. You understand the meaning of this sentence? They are distinct without a difference. So apparently they look distinct because they behave differently, perform differently, but they are not different in essence. Because Maya is so intrinsic to Brahman that it cannot be separated. But for the sake of explanation, creation, we may say that when that Brahman united with his Maya, this whole Brahman comes into being. The first thing is called as a Ishvara, and that is macroscope, Samashti level. Right? Now, is the Ishvara manifest or unmanifest? When we call the word Ishvara, is it manifest or unmanifest? It can be both. It can be both. Right? So, what is at the macroscopic level? What do we call at microscopic level? The counterpart of Ishvara is Jiva, but in that sense it is called as a Prajna. In that sense it is called as a Prajna. So when the Chaitanya or the Parabrahman identifies with the Maya, it is called Ishvara. And identifies itself with Ajnana. See, when it is Samashti level we call Maya. At the individual level we call as a Ajnana Vidya. Because the body avidya we are born. If we did not have the Ajnana, we would not have been born. The very fact that we are born means we carry some kind of a avidya or ignorance. So what is Ishvara at the Samashti level is Prajna at the individual level. When do we have that state? When do we experience that Prajna state? Only causal body is there. Avidya is there. Only causal body is there. That state we experience in deep sleep. Only in that Sushupti we get that. So what is common between Sushupti and Ishvara? Because one is microscopic, one is macroscopic. Right? So what is common between the two? They can manifest into any form. It is manifest, but it can manifest into any form. That's a commonality. See, most of you have known science. And in your body there is a thing called stem cells. There is a thing called stem cells. Now the stem cells, once we are born, they can differentiate into any kind of cell. It can become cell of the liver, it can be cell of the heart, it can be cell of the brain. So likewise, unmanifested Ishvara with the causal body can manifest into anything. It can manifest as Jiva, millions of Jiva species, and it can manifest as Jagat also. Right? So that is the commonality between Ishvara and Prajna. So our Chaitanya, when we are associated with that particular state, and that is something very close to our Brahman. Although the ignorance is there, but there is no interference of mind and the intellect. So we are very close to our true self. And Mahapurush has explained that when you enter from wakeful state to the Sushupti, at that time, and when you awaken from the state to the wakeful state, that is something very common. Because when we awaken, this is still alive. So we should not immediately get up and start doing something. When we get up from the bed, we should just sit for some time and ponder. Because the release of the self, which is very close, is still available to us. So Mahapurush has said that when we wake up from the sleep, we should not suddenly start running here and there. That is what that. Sit for some time. And that is how Buddha used to call in terms of meditation. So at that time, when we enter into Sushupti and when we come on this Nandika, we are considered very important. And we should make it useful and good use of that. So that is the level of causal body. Now because there is actually no such thing as a causal body. Just because it is responsible for the subtle and the gross body, it is called as a causal body. There is nothing like body as such. Understand? Maya and avidya, there is no matter. There is no matter. But just because it can give birth to subtle body and gross body, we call it as a Karan Sharira. But there is no Sharira, there is no matter. There is only avidya and Maya. Now because there is avidya and Maya, as I said, that Ishvara can be both, Avyakta and Vyakta, it can manifest into anything. So Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, what we call the one who is responsible for the creation of the world, this disturbance and the transformation, that can also be called as Brahma Ishvara. Or Ishvara can include both, and manifest as well as manifest. Now, having come to that, because causal body is there, manifestation had to happen. So first manifestation happens in form of subtle form, and then comes the gross. So that macroscopic subtle body, what is called? That's called Hiranyagarbha. That's called as a Hiranyagarbha. So Hiranyagarbha, or sometimes it is also called Brahma, that is the first thing which has come into being. So in Vedanta class, many times they say, from that Hiranyagarbha to Veda class, that's how they call it. So first thing ever to have come is Hiranyagarbha. That is cosmic level or macroscopic subtle body. But Chaitanya is there. The Chaitanya identifies with that subtle body, that's called as Hiranyagarbha. And at the vesti level or at the individual level, we call it as a Tejas. We call it as a Tejas. Now, just as Prajna was something which we experience in Sushupti, what do we call, when do we experience this Tejas state? That is in a dream state. It is also there in wakeful state, but it is exclusively present in case of a dream state, where the gross body is not there, only mind is there. So when some particular thing we see in the dream, we are the subject, we are the object, we created that particular object, we are the one experiencing that, and that state of experience. But that is basically Tejas. That is Swapna Avastha, and the modern science doesn't look much deep into this Sushupti and the dream. But spiritual science looks very deep into all these states of awakening. And then from that subtle came the gross. We don't go so much into the like what Panchamahabhuta, quintuplicated and everything like that. But subtle body is there, let's take it that way. And then finally we come to the gross body. It is basically comprising of these Panchamahabhutas which are quintuplicated. Panchabhut Mahabhutas. And as you all know that Panchamahabhutas are also in the Prabhutas, so we don't go into that part. So when we identify with that macroscopic gross body, Avata or Vishwana, and the individual will get called as a Vishwa. So why all this explanation of this wording we are saying that these are all manifestations of the Supreme Reality. And because Chaitanya is blended with something, you may call unholy combination or if you like. But in that so-called unholy combination, Chaitanya is there as a Rishna. Chaitanya is there as a Rishna. Substratum, meaning is correct. You know that there is support and substratum. Correct? This table is support for this book. But the paper is substratum for this book. Right? If the paper is not, the book cannot exist. The paper is substratum, but the table is support. So that all created universe, God or Brahman, what we call, is present as a substratum. So they are all different things, never so we can say that they are all manifestations of that. Now this Western philosopher, they call this Brahman or Ishvara what they call by different names. We don't know to go into that right now because we have got one subject to this philosophy. But they call it as a super soul. Some of the Western philosophers call it unknowable, some call it a will, and some call it absolute phenomenon of some substance. This is a Western philosophy way of thinking. We don't go deep into that. But what we understand is that they also recognize that there is some supreme principle, there is some divine principle which exists at the basis of this particular universe. The scientists who discovered the human genome, you know that is genome, that our DNA, everything is comprised of different genes, and we have got more than 30,000 genes, and every gene is responsible for expression of one particular protein and giving exclusive nature to the human beings. But the one who discovered that scientist, the human genome, he was an atheist to begin with, but at the end he realized, that this is something, the order in the universe which I say, is something which cannot be accident. The creation is there, but it is by a very intelligent being, and that is something which cannot happen out of an accident. So, the mere order, vyavastha, which we see in the world, is enough justification of the fact that the supreme principle commands the entire creation, operation, and sustenance of this particular universe. So like that, this Several Brahman, Guru Brahman is there. Several Brahman, as I said, Shankaracharya Maharaj, Ramanujaya, and they talked about this, the Vishesh Brahman. And Swami Shivananda Maharaj and the Mahaprabhu have taught that either may be worshipped, the destination is same. Normally people, those who are learning Vedanta, they have got a feeling that they are like lions, and you don't believe in this particular Sarvam Sakara Bhakti, whole world is Hare Krishna, Atmananda, and one with Atmananda, one with the world, like that they say. But ultimately, this Sarvam Brahman is the manifestation of the same reality. And so either we look at the Akshara, Jagata, or we look at the Akshara, as the Jiva, ultimately we lead to that Purushottama, which is the designation. So, even when we worship any particular deity, how does it help? How does it really help us in attaining the supreme status? When we worship any particular deity, what will happen? At the higher level, higher realms of the bhakti, which is called as a para bhakti, we become one with that particular reality. There is no distinction between the jiva and the bhakta attached to it. So the word ceases from it. Even when we are a Sarva Bhakta and any particular guru or any particular deity, we completely abide by that. What will happen? We become one with that. And because we become one with that, there is no world. There are no objects, no Vishya. And because there are no Vishya, no objects, we do not have the I am creation. So even the Sarva Sakara Bhakti also will take us to the destination. So Mahapurush has explained, that ultimately the knowledge is the ultimate thing which liberates us, because all the problems are because of ignorance. And mind you, ignorance is ignorance of the self, not of any other material or physical activity. You might be highly qualified man, you might be doctorate, you might have a PhD and so many other degrees also. You may know the word in so many ways, but still you will be ignorant about our own self. And that is how the ignorance of the self removes, that's the ultimate goal. And once we do that, the knowledge, the Brahman Swarup is self-resplendent. It's science by itself. It doesn't need any other preparation. Just the radiant is there. It's science by itself. It doesn't require any other source. So likewise, that supreme self science by itself, once the ignorance is removed. So, if for some means by a practice of Jnana Yoga, we are able to attain that state of elimination of Vidya, then the liberation happens instantaneously, and that they call it a Satyamukti. They call it as a Satyamukti. But even if that doesn't happen, even if we are just worshipping, educated, whatever, I say 99% people will shoot that. I mean, ego is very difficult. But Bhagavad Gita also said, Yesho Dhamma se Sham Avyakta Satyamukti. Avyakta hi Vedadurkam Devu Dharvate. So Nirguna Nirakara Bhakti is very, very difficult for whom? Those who have got attraction or those who have this physical body. So body is not physical, but mind. So we identify ourselves with the physical body. In every instant we are aware of our physical existence. You know, what is happening to us, what is the shape of the body, what has happened to the body. We are conscious about our mind. We are always thinking of our intellect. Our consciousness is physical consciousness, mental consciousness, intellectual consciousness. It doesn't transcend this. So because we are bound by the body consciousness, we are constantly attached to this body. For those people which constitute majority of the mankind, Tribhu Nirakara Upasana is very, very difficult. Sarvun Sakara is very helpful. Because in that case you are alone, you are struggling alone. But in Sarvun Sakara Bhakti, if you are helped by the deity who is supporting, Supreme Power constantly helps you. But Sarvun Sakara Bhakti is giving the same dividends, same results. Only thing is it cannot give you so-called Sadhya Mukti. It will give you something called Kamika Mukti. That once we are, this birth is over, this subtle body, as you know, separates from the physical body, that's called the death. This subtle body doesn't merge into its tattva, but it goes into the loka. If you have a Satya Mukti, all this prana, intellect, mind, everything will merge into that. Nothing will remain. But if you have a Satya Mukti, Kamika Mukti, this will remain. It will go to higher loka, different lokas we call, Brahma loka we call. It will stay, abide with that Brahman, or Brahmaji, not Brahman, for a very, very long time. And when the Brahmaji's course or term is over, by the very initiation, by the very grace of the Brahmaji, that particular Jiva who is living in Brahma will be able to attain that Nirguna Nirakara state. So it doesn't matter. If it is attainment to the Supreme, how does it matter even if it takes several verses, several years? Nirguna Nirakara Bhakti, both are equally good, and it is not that strictly no to take one of them. See, it can be simultaneous in some way also. Ultimately, once we do Sarvun Sakara Bhakti, at some point of time, beyond our knowledge also, it can transform into Nirguna. So state will come when Sarvun Sakara Bhakti automatically transforms into Nirguna. Thinking without thinking much about it, wherever we see the divinity, that we should try to revere. And seeing divinity in the whole universe is one way, that's normally part of Karma Yoga. That the same supreme reality is manifested as this physical universe and called Kshetra. So we can behold Ishvara in the manifested universe, or we can behold in all the human beings. That is how the glory of this place is. Let us behold thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve thee in all these names and forms. So this Kshetra and Kshetra Gunya, what we call in 13th chapter, they are manifestations of the same reality. So if we abide in the names and forms, there is a problem. But beyond the names and forms, if we transcend the essence of that, that very names and forms will take us to that supreme reality. Because the journey to the unknown is only from the known. So we cannot neglect the world. We cannot negate the body and the mind. They are the tools, they are the instruments given to us. And they have to be used in reaching to the highest. Even Panchakosha Vyavakasana we study that, correct? All the 5 koshas, they look like barriers, but they are our tools, they are our assets also. So they have to be made fit for realization of itself. So we have to make use of them and then transcend them at a particular time. So it is not that they are good for nothing, but they are not good forever at the same time. Then we have to realize the worth essence of them and then take care of that. Now some of you might be a student of physics. Yesterday I was just thinking, that's only what I said about the Nirguna Nirakara. If ice is there, for example, it will form. And supposing the same ice melts, it becomes water and then it turns into steam, vapor. So vapor is formless. So whether you call water as a substance, chemical substance, H2O, correct? When it exists in form of an ice, that is its form. When it exists in form of a vapor, it is without form. How is it different? Both are same. Difference is there and physical. So I just tried to probe a little more into modern physics yesterday. I just tried to say how do we see, because Swami said 2 things, ice and this vapor, steam, correct? And that is how this form is formed. But I know that there are 4 forms of matter. We know that solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. So I just was wondering to myself, how do we understand this in relation to this whole data? Just trying to think into it, and I just went deeper inside. And then I could learn something very interesting. If you are all aware of modern physics in some way, definitely you have known that matter has got 3 states, solid, liquid, and gas. The 4th state is called as the plasma. Right? What is plasma? Not the plasma of the blood. But the plasma in physics, what does it mean? That suppose water is there, water cannot have plasma technically. Because if you heat it, say several thousand degrees centigrade, beyond that, what happens? That water ionizes into hydrogen and oxygen, and more heat is there, the electron gets separated. So you will get H plus and O plus, not O minus, normal. So H plus and O plus, and so many electrons. This is called as plasma. So let us understand that the solid, what we have ice, something which is comparable to our physical body, comparable to our physical body. So liquid is something which constantly flows, keeps flowing. So that is something which we can connect it to prana. This is not something I have read anywhere. I am just trying to make analogy of that and try to see how the modern physical science helps us understand spiritual physics. Like prana in our body, prana, it keeps circulating. And that is why all the organs of the body, heart and brain, the work of anything, even the GI tract also getting the work. For that, liquid is something which can be compared to the prana. And the gas, steam was already talked about, that is something very subtle. So a subtle body is there, so that is mind, intellect. Prana can be taken as liquid, this mind, intellect can be taken as something like vapor. Plasma, what does it mean? As I said, in the completely ionized state, so that is that energy. What we call it as a energy. All these have come from the Maya and the Brahman. There should be 2 other aspects also of the 3 states. So this plasma state can be considered as this Maya Shakti or the Shakti of the Ishvara. Then I thought, what is Brahman? This is the case. Then I probed inside. Then I found out that there is a thing called Bose-Einstein condensate. I'll talk more about it tomorrow, what exactly it means. It is a state where millions of high temperature is there. No atom can exist by itself. All atoms can merge into one entity like a larger atom. And that is something which is equivalent to God. So this is just my yesterday's exercise. That I don't know how the 4th state and the 5th state also. It explains the physics in terms of spirituality, Brahman, what is Maya, and what are these 3 different things. Okay? There is a small little sharing, whatever I thought. This is a different way. Because God is divine energy, but everybody can think in any way that Gujarat Maharaj also said in Rama and Shudabodi. Everybody can think of God in one's own perception. But these are some of the views which help us look deeply at the supreme reality and attain to that divine God. Hari Om.